On this episode, we are talking about Showgirls 2, Pennies from Heaven. Can Penny, one of the background dancers in the original 1995 cult classic, raise to the same status as Nomi-Malone? We're about to find out. I'm Captain Nostalgia, and this is the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast extension of the nonprofit that educates and engages listeners on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. And buckle up, because things are about to get real weird real fast. The show starts right now. So way back when, in September of last year, when we put out our episode called The Legacy of Nomi-Malone, which if you guys haven't checked out, we'll provide a link in the descriptions below. We made this thing that if we reached $25 on our Patreon a month and or reached 500 downloads on our Showgirls episode, whichever came first, we would cover Showgirls 2. And well, we hit it, so happy Valentine's Day. I'm joined by Kelly Reynolds from the Boobies-and-Noobies podcast once again to talk about some Showgirls.
I can't believe that, one, we're doing this, and two, that this is the Valentine's Day treat for all of your listeners.
There's no chocolate in this one, so there's no flowers in this one. There's a lot of awkward writing, reactions.
Hot dogs.
God, that scene is so weird. Yeah, it kind of brings back that Jennifer Coolidge scene from Legally Blonde, where she's like, I kind of want a hot dog. You make me want a hot dog real bad.
So classy. So, I mean, can we be honest? Like, I love a good hot dog, but there is no, like, sexy way to eat a hot dog. And this movie proves that for sure, because oh boy, I don't even know where to begin with this one.
I had, so to back up to your point, we have never done a Valentine's Day episode. We typically don't do Valentine's Day episodes. I think this is maybe the second movie we've covered as far as romance is concerned. I think the first romance movie we covered on the podcast was Isn't It Romantic?
Oh, that was the one with Rebel Wilson, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rebel Wilson and the ever beautiful, whose name I can never pronounce, but she's married to one of the Jonas Brothers.
Yes. Yeah, she is gorgeous.
Yeah, she was the only reason that I sat through We Can Be Heroes. Also, we did a podcast episode on it. You guys can check it out. Shark Boy and Lava Girl. But yeah, I don't even know really where to start with this movie, Showgirls 2, other than to say this is kind of like, it's not quite a disaster, because I have that same feeling that I got watching this one that I did watching Showgirls, where I wanted to know what is going to happen next, because these characters are so, everything is just so bewildering going through this movie. I don't even know where to start when you're talking about Showgirls 2.
When you said that we were going to watch this, I, first of all, forgot that we had made that promise to listeners, so immediately was filled with regret, but also excitement. And so I started, before I even watched it, I kind of just looked it up, because I was really curious what was in store for me. And so I saw the fact that, this was basically spearheaded by one of the actresses from Showgirls, and she's the writer, director, producer, star of this.
Also, choreographer. She does choreographer. Oh. She did choreograph some of her dance moves and some of the scenes that you see throughout the course of this. I stayed to the very end.
To brag about.
It's not. I stayed to the end of this rainbow-colored mess of a movie.
Yeah, well, and she got some funding on Kickstarter, which I thought was interesting. I didn't realize how I mean, I know it's not super recent in the grand scheme of things. Like, we're in 2021 now, and the movie was made in or released in 2010. But considering that Showgirls came out in the 90s, I had no idea that it had such a gap in between Showgirls and Showgirls 2. So I thought that was really interesting. And she made a whopping $5,000 in her Kickstarter campaign, which basically looks like the entire budget for the movie. I'm just going to go ahead and say. But this was one of those ones where I kind of went into it wondering if it was meant to be purposely bad or if it just kind of came across that way, and I'm still undecided.
I wrote in my Letterboxd review after watching this movie that Showgirls was a satire of Las Vegas like stereotypes and kind of what we think about when we think about the Vegas culture. And Showgirls 2 is a parody of Showgirls 1. Everything that made Showgirls 1 such a fun time and surprisingly deep is made fun of in this movie. And it's such a big insult to the first one that I didn't even think that was possible, that I would be defending so passionately against Showgirls. I've really come to really love and appreciate the fandom and the movie itself, and the legacy that it's had over the last year with the documentary we did last year, You Don't Know Me, and the book as well from Adam Naiman, It Doesn't Suck, Showgirls. Again, still highly recommend. It was one of my favorite books I read last year. And then Showgirls the movie, like, but so rena-riffel, am I saying that right? Riffnell?
I wrote down riffle, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, okay, that sounds about right. I suck at pronouncing names. But she's not even like, she's in the first film for 2 scenes, maybe 3. Like, I just don't understand like what she was thinking when she like really started to lean into this fandom of saying, oh, like I actually have something here. Let me go ahead and lean into this, and then to take something from a iconic property and then just kind of piss on its memory is in very poor taste.
It's really interesting too, because she said that like the reason she wanted to make this movie was because she was such a big fan of Showgirls, and I feel like we don't see the joy, we don't see the fun and the camp that the original Showgirls had. Like, I think what it is she's trying to make something be something else that just kind of takes it all away from the original purpose. Like, Showgirls, we all know, you know, there's the whole idea of like how when they went into Showgirls, it was going to be like a serious, gritty drama. And then it became something else, but they didn't necessarily have the intention of it being camp and over the top. And with this one, I feel like she went full force with, we're going to parody the shit out of this movie, and it's just going to be ridiculous. And it's 2.5 hours long of basically a really long sketch about Showgirls.
I think that sums up this movie so well, is that it feels like something you would see on like Mad TV or Saturday Night Live. It never raises, and to your point too, also about it just kind of sucking the joy out of it. You know, I'm pretty much an optimistic person when it comes to movies that have a quote unquote bad reputation. We joked about it on our Malcolm and Marie episode, but I was a huge fan of The Hunt last year, which is one of the worst reviewed films of last year. I really enjoyed it. And then as well, if you guys heard our The Room episode on The Room, like I defended that movie. Like I make an actual cohesive narrative of what that mess of a movie is, and same thing for Showgirls. Like Showgirls has a through line, and I think the most baffling part about Showgirls 2 is we're never given any reason to care about these characters.
No.
And the thing about Showgirls is that at first you're automatically drawn to the mystery of Nomi-Malone. And you're like not quite sure how you feel about her, but then when she kind of gets her bags stolen by the truck driver, you start to feel empathy for her. And that empathy evolves over several decisions that she makes, and by the time that you actually get to the end, it's like she's just like a tour de force. She's just not going to take anything from nobody, and you really are invested into her character. And Penny, somehow or another, changes her name to Helga for some reason, which I don't know if I wasn't paying attention. I just don't remember like ever her like establishing that. Like there's a scene.
No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy because there's scene. Go ahead.
There's multiple plot holes like throughout the movie.
There's like so she's going. So she leaves. Like the Glenn Plummer character. And basically is like gonna try and go make it in this like PBS styled like public access like Showtime stripper show.
Yeah, it doesn't look good. It's one of those things where like, you know,
show
like
dancer.
if you've seen Showgirls, there's the glitz, there's the glamour, and for her to leave that and want to go be a star in LA on like what looks like a public access dance show, oh my gosh, like it's just the whole, you have to set aside like the production quality of this movie because that alone is enough to like skewer this whole movie on. But it is a weird narrative because again, it's 2.5 hours long. We go from her wanting to move to LA to there being a murder plot that then gets pushed aside for 2 more hours. And then at some point she rolls into being an escort but doesn't know it. And then there's a training sequence to be a better dancer with an aging dancer. And then we come back to the murder plot. It just kept going. Like I told you as I was watching it, I thought it was almost over like 3 different times.
So did I, like, truth be told. And so, like, this thing goes through so many different narratives. And like you had said, like, it transforms itself so many times. And then it just magically decides that it's going to retain the murder mystery as a plot thing. And how they even call back to freaking Showgirls in that, like, one scene is like just despicable. They're like the cop shows up and he's like, "Oh yeah, I saw you at the Cheetah in 95. Like how you doing?" And it's like, what is going on right now? But I think the reason that I don't like Penny or Helga. Also, can we talk about how cheesy and stupid it is that she calls herself Penny Slot?
Oh yeah, no, it's no good. It's she also like never says like how old she is. She's always like, I'm 30 something ish.
Can I ask you something as a female? Does this movie feel offensive to you?
Oh, on so many levels. On so many levels. Like, I'm also a woman who's worked in entertainment in Los Angeles, and this, you know, it definitely, there's a lot of things that I see with, like, you know, in Showgirls, too. We talked about, you know, just, like, the blatant misogyny that exists, like, within the people who work in this industry. But at the same time, I was, like, really offended by the female characters because it was just, I told you, for me, it felt like most of the movie, between the dialogue and just the cheesy setup, it kind of feels like the bad storyline that leads up to a porn. and then there's no porn, which I'm like, honestly, I would have preferred it to be porn.
Some of the we'll get into those in just a little bit. The quote unquote sexy scenes in this movie, huge quotes around the word sexy. There's a scene in the beginning of, I guess it's like maybe like a half hour in, where the pimp character, there's so many characters in this movie, I'm just going to refer to them based on character traits and not actual names.
I called him the pimp guy. I called him the pimp violin player.
Yeah. He like takes Helga into this like suite that's just like glistens with like swastikas, and is like trying to give this like oral history of like how the Nazis stole that symbol from like a sex goddess. And I was like, what? This is offensive to me, and I'm not Jewish. Yeah. Like this is so offensive.
It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. He also is responsible for one of my favorite lines in the movie, which is, "I like older women. They're like bananas, sweetest when ripe, right before they shrivel."
Ooh. Yeah.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
That line, though, it sets the line for exactly how females are depicted and used throughout the entire film. And this is from a female. That's what blows my mind most of all. It's like... That's
what really bothers me, too.
Like, I can understand it from a, like, Showgirls to an extent, because as a white male, I know the fact that I'm never going to be able to experience something like childbirth or a period or cramps or something like that. Like, I'm never gonna feel. I've had sexist comments directed towards me, so like I understand how those feel. But like I'm never gonna understand the world through a woman's eyes, and so like I can forgive Showgirls 1 for that, but the fact that this is written and directed by a female in Riffel is so puzzling to me. The fact that this is quite literally, it's been a long time since I've seen females this degraded on a production, because basically like whether it's the star dancer from Star Dancer, like the Gina Gershon.
In this movie, her name is Katya.
Yeah, Katya. Whether it's like it's her or, and I didn't understand their relationship. We can get to that. Get into that in a few minutes. But like whether it's her stereotype or, you know, just some of the other females that you meet, like man, like I just walked away from this movie and like I need a shower, because like this movie does not respect females on any wavelength whatsoever, and it's written and directed and choreographed and starring a female.
Yeah, that's the worst part, is just like it's such a missed opportunity. And you know, I'm a female writer, director, actor. Like this goes against everything that I want to see in my work, that I want to see being created for women today by women of today. And this is why it felt so porn-like to me. It's so much about the male gaze and, you know, rubbing our boobs together, you know, in a pool for no reason, because they're not even like having sex. It's the weirdest. There's a lot of like phallic objects, like the hot dog scene that goes Cucumbers. On for very long. But it's so male gaze like that. It just really surprises me that it's created by a woman.
I mean, also too, another point. Can we talk about the fact that early on she like gets with this like royal, was it like, it's like a duke or like a count or something along those lines, or baron. He's a royal someone from royalty, and she basically ends up it just, saying that, oh, we're gonna get married, and like you're just living this fantasy. And we're introduced to this maid that dresses like a stripper.
Yeah.
And also there's a sequence right after the first time, it's like the day after they make love, and she's like quote unquote sleeping in bed while the maid is just kind of dressed up, and she's wearing stripper heels. I'm like, what is going on? Like, I've been married for 7 years, and I know how much my wife hates heels. The moment that we get home or we are out of a function, those heels are coming off. We might not even make it to the car in a wedding. Those things are coming off with dinner.
Yep.
And like it does. It oozes a lot of that like male gaze, like weird porn vibes. And I think that's like why it turned me off. Like there's so much. I had to fast forward through some of the scenes just because of how cringy they are.
I walked away at several points. Like I was just kind of like walking through the apartment, going about my business. I'd come back. Oh, they're splashing in a swimming pool. I'd walk away. I'd come back, and they're sucking on hot dogs. Like it just, you can definitely walk away from this movie, but you will also miss many plot details if you do, because they happen all the time. Like I walked out of the room one time and came back, and 2 people had been stabbed. Who knew that was going to happen in this movie? I mean, it's really interesting. And the whole thing about it being a parody, I do just kind of question like where the line is drawn between parody and like blatant ripoff sort of thing, because there are several scenes in this movie that are clearly directly based on scenes from Showgirls. Like we've got from the very moment she gets into the truck or the car when she's hitchhiking in the beginning, we have that exact same scene, but with a gun instead of a knife. We have, what were some of the other ones? Oh, when they sabotage a dancer by throwing something on the floor and she falls. Yeah, I mean, there were multiple moments that I was like, okay, I understand that we're going for a parody, and then of course the swimming pool scene, but I don't know if parodies to me are supposed to make fun of, but in a fun way. They're supposed to like play off of like the fun, silly antics and like amplify them from something. And I don't think this did that so much as it just kind of ripped off specific scenes from Showgirls.
There is a specific line that I wrote down when she's like interviewing for someone, or I think it's the first time that she meets the pimp dude. She's like telling him about her experiences, and she's like, I always used to have to sanitize the pole that all the strippers like to lick for some reason. One of the most iconic scenes from Showgirls. But there's also another rip-off moment where she's auditioning for show dancer, and the guys, like the casting directors, narrowed it down to her and like someone else, and he's like asking her questions about her body, but it's this time, instead of it being the nipple thing, it's show me your teeth. It's just like, and like she kind of like tries to give this like same like disgusted look that Nomi gives in Showgirls, but it's this is the thing, is that she's borderline being like set up for like a sexual assault in Showgirls 1. Yeah. Like it's a very serious moment that is happening and that is taking place, and you as the audience, you can feel that. Whereas this one, it's just like, man, you took something that was like one of the more serious moments in the original and just cut it down to...
Yeah, and you made it a joke. Yeah. Like, I mean, you made it a joke, and it's not something... That's not the thing to joke about, and if you're going to do it, you do it right, and you do it respectfully. Like, this is not the moment to joke about.
I think another puzzling thing that this movie is offensive to me in some regards also comes from the fact that it shows how easy it is for women to be sex trafficked, and they just kind of play it off like a joke to where it's like, oh, I do what I want, I got to do what I can to survive. And it's like some females like turn to heroin, cocaine, alcohol, like the list goes on of just all of the narcotics that they are constantly using day in and day out to numb themselves from the pain that they are going through in sex trafficking. And this one is just kind of played off as a comical thing. Like, I think that was kind of one of the things that was most offensive to me about this movie, was how they belittled not only women, but women that had been sex trafficked.
Yeah, and also transgender men, or it's a very much of the times film. Like, you can tell there's some really random references to like Lindsay Lohan and the swine flu, and the way that they treat transgendered people in the movie, by calling them terms like trannies. And it's definitely, it's not a good look at 2010, I'll put it that way. But there's so much to unpack here. I will say one of the things that both entertained me and I found very odd were the music choices throughout. Because I don't know if you noticed this, there's like at one point she's stripping to a song that I was like, I know this song, and it was a Christmas song. And there was, what was the other one? There was some it was a weird mishmash of like free music that you can find on the internet that basically they probably paid $10 of their $5,000 budget.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in this show, understand that you listening to this right now have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us. Yeah, that's one of the and all of the quote unquote sexy scenes in this movie are so disturbing. So disturbing.
Not sexy. Yeah. Not sexy at all.
The music in this is, again, what are you going to do when you're making an independent movie? But I think for me, it's one of the things that I found so bizarre was that, like, the credit sequence is set to a number where Helga is, like, trying to, like, tease these guys at, like, a bar, and her stripper pole is a merry-go-round.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's like, in fact, I thought it was really, I think one of the first notes that I wrote down was that there's a moment where she's like about to lick the pole and it's got like Donald Duck on it. Like, I mean, it's some like cartoon animal. And you can tell like as she goes in to lick the pole that she's like, ew, no. And just like doesn't do it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is painful to watch, but what a way to start the film.
Also, we calling back to the sequence where it's a blatant ripoff of she has left her fiance or boyfriend, because the audience doesn't know, because quite frankly she doesn't know. When she leaves and kind of goes to head out to be on Star Dancer, she pulls out a gun on the guy and says, "I'm a dancer." And she's trying to like that's her entire character arc throughout like the first like third of this movie, is to be taken seriously as a legitimate dancer, not a stripper, not anything else, a legitimate dancer, like with training, ballet, everything. And but somehow by the end of it, she's okay being a stripper because so many people have told her. Like, this movie also tells women that if you hear something enough, it must be true.
It must be true.
No matter how negative that something is.
Yeah. It's, well, and you know what? Even from the very beginning, like, one of the only things I remembered about Penny from Showgirls, like, I know we had talked about that she was barely in Showgirls, but at the end of Showgirls, when we, like, basically meet Penny for the first time, she is pregnant with James's baby, and they're gonna, like, you know, do their thing together and have a baby and get married, whatever. And so I was like, what a missed opportunity to, like, start this movie. Like, you could have really done with, like, I want to see where your kid is. I want to see how that's impacted your dance career and your relationships. And we get none of that. And then she moves to LA to be a dancer and spends, like you said, the first third to half of the movie basically watching people dance on TV. And I mean, you could make a drinking game out of watching her watch dancers and saying the line, "That should have been my part," because she must say it at least 3 times.
That's a great impression. I'm just going to throw it out there.
It's one after another. There were a couple moments where I thought I had accidentally rewound the movie and played back a scene that I had already seen, because it was just a repeat over and over again. We don't see a gradual character arc. We don't see her learning anything. It's very much just, let us tell you what to do, and whatever we say, you're going to roll with it. You're an escort now. Great. I'm escorting people. You're going to do a porn film now. Okay, I guess I'll do that. Never mind. You're a stripper. That's what you've always been. Be a stripper. Okay. So, I mean, as far as like a character's agency goes, it's a big fat 0 for Penny.
Yeah, and they do have a callback to the fact that she and James had a child, and it's like this like throwaway line that she's talking to. Was it Katiana? Is that how you say her name?
Katya, yeah.
Katya, yeah. So she's like, oh yeah, she's like, tell me your story, and so she's like, well, I was with this guy James, and he was gonna make it big, and we had a baby together, and they took the baby from me. And it's like, you're digging yourself like deeper into the territory of audiences not wanting to like you. Yep. Like, again, like I go back to Nomi-Malone. Like, Nomi is a complex and just awesome character.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
She never tried to be anything other than herself. Like, watching this movie, you want to go back and give Showgirls a freaking Oscar. Like, because it at least with Showgirls took chances. Elizabeth Berkley, poor darling that she is, who's been, you know, had this movie dragged for years. Like, she really does an incredible job in Showgirls of being that character. Like her or not, she commits to it. This one, not so much. And like you said, there's not a lot to like about Penny.
I also think that the reason that Showgirls made such an impression was because there hadn't been anything like it when it came out in 1995. And so when you're entering into, I don't know if we had reached streaming platforms by this age, but you're definitely having riskier shows thanks to HBO and Showtime and Stars and these premium channels, that Showgirls 2 just kind of feels like white noise by the time that it comes out in 2010. But just some of the biggest blunders I think that I took in my notes when it comes to Penny is I'm not a female. But you know, I've never met any woman alive that keeps stuff up their vajayjay like a purse. I've never seen that. Not once.
No, of course not. I mean, you know, obviously the occasional, no, we don't. But that's only like, I mean, that's a joke that you hear like in movies, like, oh, she hid something up her vagina. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, okay. But she like does it proudly and just, it's just, you know, an option as opposed to carrying around a purse.
I mean, when you have skirts that are as tight as hers, I guess you got to get creative. When she gets robbed, her first instinct is to say, "My dance shoes. He took my dance shoes."
I wrote that down too. I would see, and that to me, like, here's the thing. I know that we talked briefly about the fact that there is a Showgirls like parody musical, which after we recorded our Showgirls episode, I immediately went and listened to all of it on YouTube and fell in love. And let me tell you, that is the way to parody Showgirls. That, my dance shoes, like that being the exclamation that you scream when you've been robbed and you have nowhere to go and nobody to call, that to me is like an excellent line for like a parody. I'm like, okay, I can get on board with that. There were some moments where I could get on board with the idea of it being a parody, but there weren't enough of those moments in 2.5 hours for me to take this seriously as a parody.
I found myself laughing so many times with so many of the things that characters would say or do.
Yeah.
And immediately followed by the word, what? There's so many of those moments in here. And another thing that, like, because I would just write down lines. And there's a line where she's, like, at the murder scene and she's spelling out the word done. I had to rewind it. And I was like, I missed something. She spells it D-U-N, done.
Yeah.
And I was like, girl, you are leaning into every stereotype of blondes and just bimbos in general.
Yeah.
Everything that Hollywood has stated about people such as yourself and all the caricatures that have been done over the years, you're leaning into that. And it's so frustrating watching this in 2021, especially after something as smart and so freaking good as Promising Young Woman. Like, this movie is so... I've been on this like kick recently where I've watched like almost all female directed or written movies recently, and let me tell you, like, there are some of my favorite films that I've seen this year. Yeah. I'm so excited to visit other works that these females have done. The stylist in one in particular, just want to call that out. It's so freaking good. But
I know. And you know what? There's actually a moment at the end of the movie where I was like, okay, is this where we turn things around? Because James, ex-fiance, boyfriend, whoever he is, shows back up, and I think it's him, and he says something to her where it's along the lines of, you know, I don't think you're actually dumb. I think you just play dumb. And it's like a callback to this line earlier in the movie where they say that like people who play dumb are like the smartest people in the world. And I was like, wait a second, did we just come full circle? Are we going to have like a brilliant breakthrough moment here? And Penny's response is,
like a possum?
Like a possum? No, Penny, not dead. Dumb. And then that just solidified it for me. I was like, oh, no, she genuinely is this stupid. That's where we're at. Okay. Because I'm like, there were so many opportunities where it's like they could have still had her be the typical blonde bimbo trying to make it in Hollywood, but said something more, because I think parody and satire has the power to do that. And this one, not so much.
Yeah, some of these things are so questionable. I think one of my favorite lines in this movie is, I made a deal with God, and lap dancing is as far as I can go. It's like,
let me see. Let me get one of mine, too. I've got a few. Okay, a lot of mine have whore in them. Is that okay to say?
Yeah.
The cop who is investigating the murder, almost near the end of the film, calls her Little Miss Red Riding whore. And then Katya also says to her, I want you to teach me to be the whore. And she says back to Katya, you're more than a whore. You're a goddess.
So bad.
And then they eat hot dogs in the swimming pool.
Yeah, that scene in particular, like, I didn't understand the whole relationship dynamic between Katiana and Helga. It confused me to where they would have these like very like, I don't even know like the right word to say it. Like they would be like nice to each other, civil. Mm-hmm. And then you get into like other scenes where they're like alone, or where they're like in public and like she's like calling her a whore and a tramp and like, trying to call security and like make a separation happen. And it's just like, I don't understand this like dynamic. Like I don't feel for either one of you.
No.
And what is the point of your relationship? Because you're either friends or your enemies. Like you can't have the both. And I think that the reason that Nomi and the Gina Gershon character Crystal, that's right, the reason that their dynamic worked so well together is because of how like deep, I guess it, for lack of a better word, like it actually ended up being by the end of the movie.
This was like a poor imitation, and you can tell that that's I think what she's trying to go for is just like a bad parody of Crystal and Nomi's relationship from the first one, because I love their relationship in Showgirls. It's this weird frenemies vibe where it's like, I'm turned on by you, but I also am like your biggest competition, and it's so good. Like it's such a great different look at female relationships. This one, again, it's going back on stereotypes. It's very much like, you're my enemy, mostly because of men. Like, it's usually because we're competing for the same man, or the same man finds us desirable or wants to give us the same job. I'm like, let's make it less about them and keep it between us girls, but, whatever. And, yeah, that swimming pool scene, again, it's just like, it's straight up, like, fantasy porn, and I'm just like, here's the thing, go for it, like, do it. That swimming pool scene in Showgirls is so outrageous with her and what's his face, Kyle MacLachlan, and I'm like, I was expecting that. The minute they got into the swimming pool, I was like, okay, here we go, swimming pool scene. And no, we don't. We just see them playing with the bubbles. And I actually read an interview with the director, writer, star, everything, choreographer. We can't forget that. And she was saying that her first cut of this movie was over 4 hours long, because one of her favorite things about the movie were these extended scenes that were meant to make the audience uncomfortable, because you're just like, I don't know why this scene is still going on. And you still get that in a lot of the scenes, especially with that swimming pool scene, which lasts for freaking ever.
Fast forward throughout the entire thing. I was just like sitting there on my phone. I'm like, come on. Oh, this is still going on? Okay. Okay.
Still happening.
Yeah, it's like a 5 to 10 minute scene. Like it makes no sense. And while we're on the topic of both their relationship and things in this movie that just don't make sense, can we talk about this last act? This last half hour literally bears no weight. Like the movie literally could have ended at an hour and 45 minutes. I feel like this movie would have been sufficient. It definitely a lot better than what we got, but a huge part of this film's thing is like we were talking about, the bogus endings, and this last half hour that makes no sense. There's so many things that happen in this last half hour that it's like, what is even happening right now? Like why are we going to this again? To bring back the offensive nature of this movie, this last half hour, they're in this tropical luau club. It kind of seems like one of those clubs you'd see on a beach.
Yeah.
Kind of hang out.
Yeah.
And
I genuinely tuned out a good chunk of the last half hour of the movie. I'll be honest.
That's fair. That's completely fair. Our introduction to this club is a white man doing a very racist impression of an Asian. And that's kind of our introduction to this. And this entire club is just very badly choreographed dance numbers going back and forth between Katiana and Penny, Helga, whoever she is in that time, because she has a third name that we haven't even brought up here.
Yeah, that's the other thing that comes in late in the game, which, again, it's a callback to Showgirls when Nomi basically gets exposed as being this, this other person that and that's the excuse that they have to get rid of her from her job. And so that's kind of what comes about in this one too, is that she basically reveals that she's this whole other person, and that somehow leads back to the murder plot. And I had no idea people were still investigating that murder because we haven't talked about it in 2 hours of the film, but lo and behold, that comes back on the scene too. So it's 8 different movies in one. And especially that last half hour, it's so chaotic that I felt like every time I left the room and came back in, there was a new movie going on.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And it's interesting. I didn't even consider the callback to the Nomi twists, but again, that is a character that is complex and has had this really disturbing childhood and has reasons for being on there.
Yeah.
Pennies was the fact that she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I think what makes it so cringy about the arrest scene that she has is the fact is when the cop's arresting her, he says, you heard the saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We aim to keep it that way. I was like, what is going on right now?
Oh God, it's so awful. I just all I want after watching this movie is to go watch Showgirls again, which is a sentence I never thought I would say in my life, but Showgirls 2 has the power to do that.
We didn't even talk about the random little person that shows up in the last half hour too. She's having this dream, and she sees this. She has this Twin Peaks moment where this little person's go find. I I don't even remember the name, but it's like the name of like a stripper or like a drag queen or something like that. Like it's a very theatrical name. She'll know what to do. And then they go to like this like random statue that's just a blue canvas man, like a man with wings, and it's got like hippie flowers all over it. And she slowly seduces the statue, and then gets down to like this like end, and she pulls out this like box and reveals this like commemorative Jesus plate. And then that's it. Like that's the scene. And then they go back to the club where you have the racist white guy, and it's like, I feel like I'm missing something here. How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
No, it's hard to like make rhyme or reason of this movie in general, just because there are so many things that pop out of nowhere and then immediately go away. We just move on. For me, like, I know the murder comes back in later, but the whole original like accidental murder scene where she pushes a girl down who falls on her knife, and then later on she pushes the pimp down the stairs and shoots him twice, and then he gets up and walks away, and we like never hear from him again. So I mean, there's just so many things that they don't connect. I teach online creative writing and screenwriting classes, and so this is something that like I've never even seen something this poorly constructed show up in a class with beginning writing students. Like it's a wonder to me that this was made, period. And I wonder, because I know that when it came out, they were trying to market it in late night, midnight movies and trying to like automatically turn it into a cult classic the way that Showtunes has become a cult movie. Or not Showtunes, what did I say? Showgirls. And I just wonder how this has been received by audiences, because I feel like I haven't heard much about this, whereas Showgirls we know is like a hit amongst so many different groups of people.
All right. Well, I can only read what there is here, because there's 500 reviews on 50 plus reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. It holds at 12% right now, which I just want to say all of those people are extremely generous.
Yeah.
I gave this a 1.5 on my letterbox. Like there was I had fun with this movie for what it was, because it's so absurd that like I really leaned into the absurdity as a viewer. But I feel like I need to go back and recorrect it after recording this podcast, because it's pretty freaking terrible.
It's one of those things where it's like I was texting a group of friends while watching it saying, oh my gosh, this is so funny. This is so ridiculous. Like, it's so bad. We have to watch this together and just like laugh about it. And the longer it went on, it just became less and less fun. And it became more, it felt like work, like having to like sit through and watch it, because there was no reward. There was no payoff. There was no comedy. There was no comedy for the sake of it being funny. I mean, like it was very much just like, I don't know if you meant this to be funny or if this is just that bad. And then there's no real ending either. I mean, I will say, I think the one like little wink I will allow is that at the end she hands somebody a penny because her name is Penny. And I'm like, oh, it's her calling card. Okay. But that's something that 2.5 hours into a movie, not as interested.
Handing someone a penny should not be your magic payoff.
No.
For this movie. Let's go ahead and get into some critic reviews right here. I have 4 of them. Yes. According to Rotten Tomatoes, Richard Propes from the Independent Critic. This is wow, okay. These first 2 are actually within the last year. This is one from September. He says, "Brilliant film, ? Not a chance."
Yeah, and that was one of the things we loved in the in both the documentary and the book about Showgirls was just this idea of like, we're not telling you that you have to love Showgirls. We're not telling you it's a good movie, but why don't you give it a second chance and think about it can be both good and bad, and there's nothing wrong with that. This one, I don't think I'm ever going to say that or hear anybody else say that, but prove me wrong.
I will wait till we get to the last critic.
Oh no.
So Brian Orndorff of Blu-ray.com. I totally butchered that name. I'm so sorry if you come across this, and I'm sorry. So the first guy I give his rating scale is a 2 out of 4. This guy gives it a C, which again I feel like is too generous. He says, "Yes, dear readers, Riffel has made Showgirls 2 Pennies from Heaven, though I'm certain nobody asked her to." I'm curious how the conversation for this movie got started. I really want to know how this movie started kind of pitching around, and how, like, did she have like a board of like offenses that she was gonna like bring into this, where she was like, we're gonna downgrade women, Asians, Jews, and we're just gonna lean into every cliche stereotype and rip off Showgirls 1.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to know. I mean, I do, but I don't.
That's the next book I want from Adam Naiman, is I want to know how Showgirls 2 got made, because I think too they talk about it in the book where like Riffel went to Paul Esterhosen and like asked him to like either direct it or produce it, and he like gave his blessing.
Yeah, which is interesting, because he doesn't seem like the kind of guy, knowing what we do about him, to like want to step away from the spotlight, but at the same time he's changed his narrative on what Showgirls was meant to be since it came out. So at the time, maybe he was still very much ashamed of it. I don't know.
And his career is interesting, because after he made Hollow Man in 2000, he actually ended up going back to his homeland and getting back, because I think he's a French director. So he went back into French cinema, and it was actually upon his return, I think he had done 2 or 3 films, but he ended up actually winning an Oscar after. So he really turned his career around and like really went and did a lot of serious stuff. So he just kind of seems like an interesting choice to kind of get to bring into production. If I was him, I would want to step as far away from possible, but that's just me. Josh Bell from Film Rackets writes, quote, a grand artistic statement with bargain basement production values and a remarkable lack of talent on screen.
I want to know what the bold statement is. That's what I want to know, because I don't think that's the thing. If this was saying something and it just did it in a really bad way, I'd be okay with that. But I don't even think it does do that.
And again, I go back to the previous remark that I had made about it showcasing how easy it is for women to get persuaded and get drafted into sex trafficking and human trafficking. And that's about the only thing that this film honestly has to say. And this film, from a victims and villains standpoint, is really hard to talk about because it's a bad movie, and we try to limit the number of films that we cover. That it's just like, we're just gonna tell you that this movie is bad, avoid it on all accounts. And I mentioned The Room earlier and the Hunt, two films that we covered last year, where Celeste and I were on very opposite sides, but I always was able to kind of be the voice of optimism and hope and kind of really pull out some of these deeper themes. And Showgirls 2 just does not have anything to do. I walked away from this baffled as a cinephile, confused as a film critic, and as a podcaster said, I'm going to probably make a podcast that is 10 times more cohesive than this movie was.
Yeah, mission accomplished. Yeah, it's really baffling. Because I don't know. I mean, you know that when you watch a movie, regardless of whether or not it's set up to be an Oscar contender or just a piece of fun, just a fun rom-com broad comedy, there's still something that I think most filmmakers want you to take away from the movie, regardless of how serious it's supposed to be. I write predominantly comedy, and for me, there's always still an underlying message of, does true love win, or do these, friendship, the power of friendship. And this is one of those ones where you're just sort of I'm not really sure what you wanted out of this movie as the filmmaker. And because of that, I don't know what I'm supposed to take away from this, because nothing is clear. There's not even there aren't even possibilities. You don't all have to take away the same thing from a movie, but I don't know one thing to take away from this movie.
Before we get into the last surprisingly positive review here on Rotten Tomatoes, there is this journey throughout the film where I remember actually writing in my notes. I said, what is Helga hoping to achieve here? It seems like her goals seem to constantly flip-flop throughout the entire course of this. And when you're talking about specifically mental health, we talked about this in a lot of episodes more recently, where it's really easy to be swayed by the culture, and it's really easy to have those influence. And there's a great movie coming out on Shudder that I can't really talk about, and it sucks so much because it's good. But by the time that this episode comes out, I'm still under embargo. But it deals a lot with the current state of kind of how social media has influenced us. And our identities and what we think about Fire Festival is another thing that, yeah, I know.
I love it. I love talking about Fire Festival. I could talk about Fire Festival for days.
All right. I know what our next collaboration is going to be.
I love it. From Mean Girls to Showgirls to Showgirls 2 to Fire Festival. Yeah, no, I'm with you. Well, and honestly, from a screenwriting standpoint, the thing that you think about with every character is what is their want and what is their need. And usually they're in direct contrast to each other. One of them is preventing them from discovering their need. And so for this movie, Penny / Helga, Olga, whoever she is, she and Nomi have the same want. They want to be a star. Like, it's simple enough, you know, but I think the difference is that we never really, she does get what she wants. I don't think she ever gets what she needs in this movie. And I think Nomi does in Showgirls in some way. It's all about her trying to be a star while also not losing herself. And she has that realization. This one, not so much. And I think that's the one thing that kind of prevents me from finding anything redeemable about Penny.
Exactly. There are these constant arcs where she is changing herself based around who she's around. You know, she tries very much to stand her ground around the violin guy, and once he's like, which again, I want to talk about in just a few minutes, but when she's around him, she's like, she tries to stand her ground in one scene, and then literally the next sequence is her calling and says, all right, I'll do it. You know, I got to do what I got to do in order to survive. And it's like, no, you are completely messing with your mental health right now. Like, you don't have to be what every guy wants to be or wants you to be. I think that's definitely a lot of influences. And I want to ask, like, as a female, like, do you ever feel like you know, how dangerous is it for you to change yourself for a guy or for someone that you're dating or interested in?
Yeah. I think women especially can be very competitive with one another. Like, I think so often and I can't speak for men, but I think so often we compare ourselves to each other. Like, oh, she's prettier than me. She's more successful than me, whatever that means. She, you know, has more love interest. She, you know, all this stuff. But when it comes to our relationships, you know, specifically as a woman who dates men, the scariest thing to me is losing yourself in your romantic relationship. Like, that to me is that there is some give and take, there's compromise, as there is with any relationship, but it's a genuine concern, I think, for a lot of women, is how much of yourself are you willing to give up to be with this person? And I think if that's something that, you know, we want to see explored in movies, I'm all for it. I love exploring relationships between people in film. Like, that's why I love watching movies and TV shows, is for the relationship dynamics. But this one, there's never a compromise. She very much gives up whoever she is, whoever she wants to be, to adhere to somebody else's picture of who she should be. And I mean, to me, it's terrifying.
Well, she lacks conviction.
Yeah.
And I've been in relationships in the past where, like, I have changed myself and my interest to better suit that person in hopes that they'll like, and it always ends up in heartbreak. And we talked about this in our last episode with Malcolm and Marie, where in the end, like, just be yourself. And I think that's never a lesson that Penny ever learns throughout the course of this. Like it said, like there's no redemption for this character, because in the beginning she is like wanting to be taken seriously as a dancer. Like that's her goal. Like, that's what she's on the road to do, and that's a commendable thing. Like, you are wanting to be more than a stripper, more than someone that gives lap dances and has dollar bills stuffed in their G-string. Like, that's commendable, completely 100%. But the fact that by the time the movie ends, you are now on this journey. You've gone through all this crazy stuff, and now you've arrived at this point to where every character in this movie, every interaction has ended up with you being called a whore and a stripper, and now you've just been okay with it. Like that just doesn't make sense to me. And I've shared this before, but there's a psychological component within our brain that if you hear stuff a lot of the time and it's not true, that if you hear it enough over time, you end up actually accepting it. I've shared this on our...
It's like gaslighting.
Yeah. I've shared this on our podcast before, like the reason that I do mental health and suicide prevention, and we have a podcast and a nonprofit like Victims and Villains, is because I lost a friend that basically went through this exact same thing where he was told he was worthless. And when you hear that enough, eventually he came to the idea that, oh, he must just not be worth his own life, and so I'm going to take it. And that's the most tragic thing, is that, he lost himself in the identity of how others see him rather than how he saw himself. And that's kind of almost the arc that Helga goes through in the course of this. And that's one other thing that this movie is extremely hard to sit through at certain points. Yeah. Like you said, like it's a chore because of just how offensive it can be.
Yeah, no, that really honestly, it explains it better to myself of, just sort of like why I was feeling the way I was feeling while watching it. Is Penny very much is a victim. And so as the movie goes on, when we traditionally watch a story like this, we see a victim becoming a survivor. We see them like overcoming whatever it is, all the forces of evil that are, falling down around them. And we never get that in this story. And so that's why I can see where like you would have fun watching like the first 30 minutes to an hour. It just, it's one ridiculous thing after another. But as it goes on and you don't see Penny changing and you don't see the circumstances around her changing, for sure, that you wonder, how is this going to end? Like it's not going to end quote unquote happily because she's not changing either. So it is a difficult one to sit through, and the way you phrased it was really beautiful because that really does explain why it's so difficult to sit through.
Yeah, so I think we've kind of dug this one into the ground.
I want to hear the positive review of this movie because I am so curious what somebody else saw in this movie that we clearly did not see.
Okay, so this is Whitney Siebold is a man. It is a man. From Crave Online, and he says, the film itself is a daunting and swirling phantasmagoria of storylines, weird back and forth, and just as much bizarro character vacillation as its predecessor, giving it a 6.5 out of 10.
Wow. You know what's funny too is like that word choice that Whitney used did not say to me that it was like necessarily positive.
It is the only fresh review on here.
Interesting. I mean, it's got strange, bizarro characters. I think that was Whitney's choice of words. Yeah, I see that. It's definitely outrageous. It kind of almost reminds me less of Showgirls and more of like a John Waters movie in a way, but do you know what I mean? Like it kind of has that style to it.
Oh yeah. I can see that. And had they kind of like divorced themselves from the Showgirl name, I would have probably given this film a little bit more grace because of that. But the fact that you're calling this a sequel to Showgirls is just astonishing to me, because Showgirls, again, we talked about this in our Nomi-Malone episode. Showgirls, the first one, was this, like you had said, like this serious, gritty drama that was going to look at the ins and the outs of someone trying to make it as a showgirl and not compromising who she was in the process. And her story is so compelling. And granted, like there are some sequences and things in the movie that it's just like, man, what? Like there are still things that, like, I quote from that movie all the time that are just baffling. Like it's not a good script, and it's not inherently a good movie. It's made a good movie because of the ridiculous things that it goes, but at the same time, it's bold and it's brash, and it's not afraid to go into things about sexual assault and the actual what it's like to grow in the high stakes life of Las Vegas.
Well, and I didn't know until we watched the documentary and read the book that so much of what midnight movie showings are and what camp is, you know, are so associated with like the LGBTQ plus community that they found so much that they had in common with somebody like Nomi. And I don't think there's the same connect with this movie. So I'd be really surprised, aside from Whitney, to hear that this movie has the same renown in that community, in the midnight movie cult world, as Showgirls. I don't see it holding up the way that Showgirls has.
Oh, it's super duper forgettable. It holds a 1.7 on IMDb. I just want to throw this out there that I don't think under any circumstances this movie should be taken as seriously. And I want to see if I can find any user reviews.
And unlike Showgirls, I don't think there was ever an intention when making this movie that it was supposed to be serious in any circumstance. Like, we very much said this is meant to be a parody. Like, it's not a great parody, but Showgirls had grit. This one is just supposed to be ridiculous through and through.
Yeah. So this one randomly, we'll this will be the last time we talk about. Just this line goes perfectly. This is the ideal movie to show film students on how not to do a movie. This is coming from Casablanca Vic on IMDb. I think that sums it up so perfectly. And since we have kind of taken a little bit more of the review route on this, we'll dust off the Rorschach rating and we'll go ahead and say 0 to 5, halves being allowed. Where would this land for you?
This is probably going to be about as low as it gets for me. Like, in terms of the content, in terms of the filmmaking, the themes and messages, which are virtually non-existent. Like, this is probably going to be a 0.5 for me. Like, I don't even think I could give this. If I was reviewing a romance novel that was like this bad, I probably wouldn't even leave a review, and I might just like tell all my friends, like, you know what, I'm gonna save you the time, like, don't read this. And that's sort of how I feel about this one. Is I could see you watching like the first half hour to hour, sitting through the whole movie again. I don't think I can do it, so I'm gonna stick with a 0.5.
I will also go 0.5. Like I said, originally on Letterboxd, I gave this 1.5, and that's after just watching it, but like just like sitting in it and like thinking about it and like actually like talking about this movie. I got a shower before we started recording, and I feel like I need another shower because of how disgusting this movie is. Yeah, it's just a bad one. There's nothing else you can say. This is a terrible movie through and through.
It's going to be a while before I want to eat a hot dog again, too. And I am a hot dog fan, so I'm a little disappointed.
Oh, yeah. That man. So much about this movie. If you guys have seen Showgirls 2, let us know what you guys think, because this, dear God, this was a wild ride. So thank you guys to all the patrons that support us. I definitely think this episode is going to be a niche group of those of us that have actually seen the Showgirls 2, and then also those that really like bad movies. So this is for you guys. Thank you so much. But where can people find Boobies and Noobies online?
Oh, yes. You can find Boobies and Noobies at boobies-and-noobies.com. I am across the socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Boobies Podcast, and wherever you stream your podcast. So, find us, listen, and come talk romance with me. I'm happy to give any kind of recommendations you need. She does an excellent job on that podcast. We had you a couple weeks back for awareness-a-thon, and heard a lot of great feedback from your panel in particular. So thank you so much for being a part of that. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad that you invited me to be a part of that, because I love what you do here on this podcast and the mission behind it. It's something that we need to be talking about. So I am happy to be a part of that in any way. Well, thank you so much. You guys can find us at Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and Letterboxd. And while you're at Letterboxd, go ahead and follow me as well. It's at Captain Nostalgia. Some of our Instagram feed this year has been my film journey, so you guys can see the full thing over on Letterboxd. But victimsandvillains.net will get you guys links to all of our social media, our Patreon, wherever you guys get your podcasts from, movie reviews, and most importantly, our suicide prevention resource library. This is the reason we make the content we do. So thank you so much, Kelly, for sitting down and going through this bizarre fever dream parody attempt at Showgirls and Showgirls 2. Always a pleasure. All right, well, that's going to do it for us on this episode. We'll be back this Tuesday talking about Judas and the Black Messiah. So until next time, make sure to hit that subscribe button and have a great day.